Unthinkable now, but completely normal in the 1950s. From smoking on airplanes to kids riding in the back of pickup trucks, daily life in America was filled with habits that shock us today. Even grocery stores closed midweek, and women often needed a husband's signature for credit. Join us as we uncover these surprising memories. Like, share, and subscribe so we can keep the past alive together. 30. Shooting tin cans off fences. On lazy afternoons, children lined up tin cans along wooden fences and plinked them off with .22 rifles. The metallic clang and tumbling cans were sounds of triumph. Parents might glance outside offering a tip on aim before heading back indoors. Neighbors didn't complain, and police never showed. Now it would draw alarm and emergency calls. But in the 1950s, target practice in the backyard was just another way children learned patience, skill, and fun. 29. Asbestos in homes. Asbestos in the 1950s was praised as a miracle. It lined attics, wrapped pipes, and filled walls, praised for keeping homes warm in winter and cool in summer. Contractors bragged about it, and homeowners proudly pointed to it as progress. Its fibrous texture seemed harmless, even soft to the touch. Today, it's treated as a biohazard. But then asbestos was celebrated, not feared, a silent danger hiding in plain sight. 28. Buying raw milk from farms. In rural America, families could buy unpasteurized milk directly from farmers, hand over a couple dollars and walk away with a jug still warm from that morning's milking. Neighbors swore by its rich taste and wholesome quality. Risks weren't discussed, trust in the farmer was enough. Today, raw milk sales are restricted or banned in many states. But back then it was a simple, everyday connection between families and their local farms. 27. Kids given sips of alcohol at gatherings. Family gatherings sometimes included children being offered a small sip of beer or wine. Grandparents laughed, uncles winked, and children made faces at the bitter taste. It wasn't considered harmful, but a playful moment, a blurred line between childhood and adulthood. The gesture was part of bonding, not rebellion. Now it would raise eyebrows and concern. But in the 1950s, it was simply a harmless rite of passage. 26. Backyard tree houses built from scrap. Tree houses in the 1950s were cobbled together from leftover wood bent nails and imagination. Safety rails were rare, and the ladders wobbled with every step. Children built them without adult supervision, learning through trial error and the occasional dropped hammer. A loose board added character, not danger. Today, store-bought playhouses come with instructions and warranties. But back then, a shaky treehouse was a kingdom, a place where childhood ruled. 25. Dogs roaming neighborhoods freely. In the 1950s, dogs moved from yard to yard as if the entire block belonged to them. Some wore collars, others did not, but nearly all were known by name. They napped on porches, followed children to school, and drank from any water bowl left outside. Rarely did anyone call animal control. Now leash laws and fences dominate. But in that era, dogs belonged everywhere, companions of the whole neighborhood rather than just one family. 24. Teachers paddling students. Discipline in the 1950s often meant a wooden paddle hanging behind the teacher's desk. A quick swat for misbehavior was considered part of education. Parents rarely objected, often supporting the teacher's authority. The threat alone was enough to keep many children in line, blending fear with respect. Today, corporal punishment in schools sparks outrage. But back then it was seen as necessary, even beneficial, to shape manners and discipline. 23. Smoking in movie theaters. Picture a crowded theater in the 1950s, the beam of the projector cutting through a haze of cigarette smoke. Ashtrays were built into the seats, glowing embers punctuating the dark. People lit up during previews of the feature, even during the credits. The smell lingered long after the film ended, blending with popcorn and velvet upholstery. Now the thought is unimaginable. Yet then smoking was part of the magic, another layer of atmosphere wrapped around the silver screen. 22. Leaving front doors unlocked. Neighborhood trust in the 1950s was so strong that many families left their front doors unlocked even while on vacation. Friends and neighbors stopped by freely, sometimes walking right in to borrow sugar or leave a note. The sense of community was stronger than any lock. Safety meant knowing every face on the street, not installing cameras or alarms. Today, double locks and security systems are common, but back then trust was the barrier, and it seemed to be enough. 21. Drinking beer at lunch during workdays. In factories and offices alike, the 1950s midday break often included a cold beer. Workers stopped at taverns clinking glasses before heading back to the job. Even bosses sometimes joined in. It wasn't seen as irresponsible, but as a way to relax and recharge. The work still got done, and no one measured blood alcohol levels. It was part of the rhythm of labor, alongside coffee breaks and smoke breaks. Now, HR handbooks forbid it, but back then, beer at lunch was a sign of camaraderie, not carelessness. 20. School rifle clubs. Many schools in the 1950s had rifle clubs with students carrying .22 caliber rifles to practice on indoor ranges. Teachers or coaches supervised safety, but firearms on campus were not alarming. Competitions took place in gyms or on football fields, and hitting the bullseye was a point of pride. Students posed with rifles in yearbook photos without controversy. Today, the very thought is unimaginable. Yet in that time, target practice was as ordinary as debate club, rooted in discipline and responsibility. 19. Hitchhiking as common travel. Sticking out a thumb at the roadside was a normal way to get around in the 1950s. Travelers scribbled destinations on cardboard signs, hopeful for a friendly driver. Families, farmers, or salesmen pulled over, offering rides and sometimes even lunch. Hitchhiking was seen as neighborly, a symbol of trust on the open road. Today it's considered risky and reckless. But back then it embodied a culture of community and adventure, when strangers were more likely to be seen as helpers than threats. 18. Kids buying cigarettes at the store. In the 1950s, a child could walk into the corner store, place coins on the counter, and walk out with a pack of cigarettes. Sometimes parents sent them, deliberately treating it as just another errand. Vending machines made it even easier. Drop in change, pull a knob, and a pack slid down. Shopkeepers rarely asked questions. The sight of a child carrying cigarettes raised no eyebrows. Now, the image is shocking. But in that era, cigarettes were woven into daily life so deeply that even children became part of the routine. 17. Riding bikes barefoot with no helmets. A summer afternoon in the 1950s often meant racing bikes down gravel roads with bare heads and bare feet. Playing cards snapped in the spokes, knees scraped raw, and laughter echoed through the streets. Helmets were unheard of and shoes were optional. A tumble meant a skinned elbow and maybe a new scar, to show off, nothing more. Parents rarely intervened, trusting children to learn balance and caution by trial and error. Today, protective gear is non-negotiable. But then the risks were simply part of the fun, proof that childhood was lived fully in the open air. 16. Children roaming until streetlights came on. Childhood freedom in the 1950s stretched from dawn until dusk. Parents waved goodbye in the morning, expecting kids to return only when the streetlights flickered on. Children climbed trees, splashed in creeks, and explored construction sites. They knew which yards had mean dogs and where to stop for a drink of water. Neighborhoods felt like extended playgrounds watched only by a collective, trusting community. Today, GPS trackers, cell phones, and constant supervision define childhood. But back then, freedom was the rule, and the simple promise to be home by dark was enough. 15. Lead-based paint everywhere. In the 1950s, lead-based paint was considered modern and durable. Bright, glossy colors covered nursery walls, school hallways, and even children's cribs. The sharp scent of fresh paint was associated with progress, not danger. Parents let kids help stir the paint, tiny hands gripping wooden sticks, unaware of the invisible risks. A fresh coat was simply improvement, a proud weekend project. Now lead is a health hazard requiring careful removal. Yet in those days, a can of paint was just another tool for building a brighter, shinier home, no warnings attached. 14. Kids steering cars from dad's lap. For many children in the 1950s, the thrill of driving came years before a license. Sitting proudly on a father's lap, small hands clutched the wheel while dad worked the pedals. Neighbors waved, smiling at the sight of a child guiding a big sedan down the block. No one scolded or worried about safety. It was a rite of passage, a playful introduction to responsibility behind the wheel. For a child, it felt like growing up overnight. Today, the idea would bring outrage and fines. But in that era, those few blocks of shared steering were priceless memories treasured for their innocence and freedom. 13. Tractors on roads with no warning signs. In farm country during the 1950s, tractors moved slowly down winding roads with no flashing triangles or reflective stickers. You could round a bend and find yourself behind one, crawling along at 10 miles an hour, exhaust puffing skyward. Children often rode on the fender's legs, dangling dangerously close to the wheels. Passing required patience and nerves, but nobody complained. It was simply life in rural America, where farming and traffic shared the same narrow lanes. Today, bright orange emblems and flashing lights are mandatory. But back then, the only warning was the sound of the engine and the plume of smoke hanging in the air. 12. Driving without car insurance. Across many states in the 1950s, owning car insurance was optional. People trusted their driving skills or simply felt the extra expense wasn't worth it. Some boasted of decades without accidents, proud of saving money by skipping a policy. Police rarely asked for proof unless something serious happened. Roads were filled with uninsured drivers, relying on caution and a bit of luck. It was part of the thrift of the era, stretching every dollar mattered more than what-ifs. Today, the thought of driving uninsured feels reckless and terrifying. Yet then it was simply one more corner cut in the effort to live within modest means. 11. Fishing without worrying about licenses or limits. In the 1950s, a fishing trip didn't begin with paperwork. A cane pole, a can of worms, and a quiet pond were all you needed. Children learned to bait a hook before they could write their names, and afternoons slipped away with nothing but ripples on the water. Licenses and size limits technically existed, but they were rarely enforced for casual fishing. A tug on the line and the splash of a sunfish was reward enough. Parents sat on the bank talking softly while kids waded in shallow streams with rolled-up pants. Today, strict regulations, fees, and posted warnings are everywhere. Yet back then, fishing was about peace, patience, and the hope of catching supper before the sun dipped low. 10. Fireworks in the street. 4th of July evenings in the 1950s lit up with neighborhood fireworks. Fathers crouched on pavement with matches sending bottle rockets skyward. Children circled barefoot, shrieking with excitement as sparks rained down. There were no permits, no city zones, only a bucket of water standing by. The air filled with smoke, paper scraps scattered across the street, and neighbors cheered from porches. Now fireworks are tightly regulated. But then your block was the fireworks show, the night alive with noise magic and the smell of powder drifting long after the last spark faded. 9. Tossing trash out, car windows, road trips in the 1950s left behind a trail, paper cups, soda bottles, and candy wrappers tossed from windows without hesitation. The grassy shoulders of highways collected litter like confetti, and few gave it a second thought. Cleanup days brought scout troops to gather the mess, but until campaigns like Keep America Beautiful arrived, tossing trash felt natural, even expected. The road swallowed what you discarded. Today, littering feels unthinkable, but back then it was part of travel. You rolled down the window, let go, and never looked back. 8. Smoking on airplanes. Flying in the 1950s was glamorous. Passengers settled into plush seats, and before takeoff, ashtrays clicked open in the armrests. A faint haze rose as cigarettes were lit, mingling with coffee and the sharp scent of jet fuel. Flight attendants offered matches as casually as they poured cocktails. Even in coach, smoking was part of the atmosphere. Legs crossed, magazines open, smoke curling toward the cabin lights. Now the thought of it is shocking. Yet back then, smoking at 30,000 feet wasn't just allowed, it was part of the flying experience, a symbol of sophistication in the age of air travel. 7. Cars without seatbelts. Step inside a family car in the 1950s. Children roamed the wide back seats, sprawled across the bench, or perched high on the fold-down armrest, the best view in the house. When a sudden stop came, a parent's outstretched arm was the only safety feature. Nobody thought twice about crash tests or restraint systems. The joy was in the freedom siblings pressing their noses to the glass, singing songs, or arguing over who got the armrest for the ride. Now it feels unimaginable. But back then, the absence of seatbelts wasn't negligence, it was simply the way family travel was done, wrapped in trust, habit, and the laughter of children, unrestrained. 6. Carrying pocket knives into airports and courthouses. In the 1950s, a pocket knife was an everyday tool, not a weapon. Men carried them clipped to belts to sharpen pencils, cut string, or slice apples. Boys often had smaller ones, proudly shown to friends. Security was casual. At an airport, you walked directly to your gate with the knife still in your pocket. In a courthouse, guards checked bags for radios, not blades. The knife was practical, an extension of daily life. Today, the thought of a pocket knife in a terminal is enough to spark panic. But back then, it was as ordinary as a handkerchief in your pocket, useful, unthreatening, and never cause for alarm. 5. Dumping used motor oil in drains or yards. On a Saturday morning in the 1950s, you might find a father stretched out on a blanket in the driveway, wrench in hand, draining the family car's oil. The thick black liquid was then poured into a storm drain or across the edge of the yard, no second thoughts. To him, it was part of self-reliance. Handling your own car maintenance was a mark of pride, and the rainbow sheen floating across puddles after rain was barely noticed. Children might poke at the shimmering oil with sticks, fascinated by the colors, not knowing the danger. Today, dumping oil feels reckless, even criminal. Yet in those days, it was ordinary, another Saturday chore that smelled of gasoline, grease, and pride, and keeping your own car running. 4. Burning piles of autumn leaves in the street. Autumn in the 1950s came with a smell all its own, the sharp, earthy scent of burning leaves. Families raked mountains of red and gold into the street, set them alight, and watched the smoke curl lazily into the cool evening sky. Neighbors gathered, chatting with mugs of coffee as embers glowed. For children, it was magic. They poked the piles with sticks, watching sparks jump and scatter, the warmth rising into their cheeks as twilight fell. Nobody spoke of air quality or fire codes. This was tradition, part cleanup and part celebration. Now, such a sight would bring citations and fire trucks. But back then, it was simply fall's signature smoky air mingling with pumpkin pie Friday night football and the comforting sense of community. 3. Kids riding in the open bed of pickup trucks. Imagine a 2-lane road stretching across farmland in the 1950s. In the rattling bed of a pickup truck, children bounced around in the open-air hair, flying wildly in the wind. They waved at passing cars, laughter echoing as the truck rattled along. No seat belts, no helmets, only the rush of freedom. Parents never flinched at the sight. To them, it was harmless fun, a chance for kids to feel the road in a way that seatbelts would never allow. Neighbors smiled and honked, a kind of community approval woven into every ride. Today it's unthinkable. Laws, fines, and flashing lights would stop it immediately. But in those days, the back of a pickup felt like a rolling playground, as much a part of small-town life as baseball diamonds and soda fountains. 2. Smoking in hospital waiting rooms. Step into a hospital in the 1950s and the first thing you notice isn't sterile air, it's the smoke. Ashtrays sat on every waiting room table. Men lit up Lucky Strikes and women tapped ash into trays while flipping through worn magazines. The air carried a cocktail of smells, disinfectant, burnt coffee, and the dense haze of tobacco. Even nurses strolled past without comment. Doctors lit up between patients, their white coats faintly scented with smoke. Families awaiting news distracted themselves with another cigarette, not considering whether it was strange to smoke inside a place of healing. For them, it was normal. Today, hospital lobbies gleam with polished glass, no smoking signs, and purified air. Yet that old image remains, fluorescent lights casting shadows through a smoky fog, whispers of anxious families rising with the curling haze. It was unsettling, but it was the world people knew. 1. Drinking a couple beers before driving. Picture a warm summer evening in the 1950s, the air heavy with the smell of hamburgers fresh off the grill. After a backyard barbecue or a quick stop at the local tavern, many fathers would climb behind the wheel with a couple of beers already in their system. There was no sense of panic or fear. It was simply part of the rhythm of daily life. Nobody spoke about blood alcohol levels or sobriety checkpoints. If a policeman waved you through, it was more about whether you looked steady than about scientific measurement. Families piled into the car, children tumbling in the backseat, windows rolled down, and the hum of cicadas outside blending with the crunch of gravel on the driveway. Today, the very thought is chilling, but back then it carried little stigma. Driving after drinking wasn't considered reckless. It was ordinary, expected even. Looking back reminds us how far standards of safety and responsibility have come. The 1950s may feel like another world now, a time when freedom often outweighed rules and trust seemed stronger than fear. Looking back reminds us not just of the risks, but also of the innocence and community spirit woven into daily life. These memories are more than curiosities. They are windows into who we were and how far we've come. Which of these moments surprised you most, or maybe reminded you of a story from your own family? Share it in the comments. We'd love to hear. And if journeys like this warm your heart, make sure to like, subscribe, and join us again as we bring America's forgotten past back to life.